In Shanghai, one of the richest and most modern cities in China, there's a romantic problem that's hard to ignore. The city is full of single women over 30, successful and financially independent. But where are the men? Why are the vast majority of them still single? At a recent speed dating event, nearly 1,000 women signed up. They paid expensive fees, filled with hope of finding someone. And how many men attended? Not even 50. And this is not an isolated case. In many events organized by matchmaking agencies, the ratio of men to women can be as high as 1 to 9. That is, for every man who shows up looking for a partner, there are 9 single women also hoping to find someone. Interviews with Chinese men who attend these events highlight this disparity. And if we talk about men who are truly available, the outlook is even more discouraging. The numbers don't lie. When this estimate was made, Shanghai had more than 15 million local residents. About half, or even more, were men. In the age group between 28 and 35, there were more than 1 million, and about half were still single. So far, it seems like a good number, right? But this is where the filter of reality comes in. If a Chinese woman is looking for a man who is at least 1.78 meters tall, that figure drops to about 100,000. And if she also demands a college education, which is quite common, that number is cut in half. And if the criteria include an annual salary over 400,000 yuan, about $55,000 a year, we're talking about less than 1% of those men. That means there are fewer than 1,000 men in the entire city who meet that ideal profile that many women are looking for. That's why, when a single man appears at one of these events, he often becomes a prize. The competition is intense, though not always evident. But this scenario reveals an even bigger problem. There's a significant difference between what many Chinese women expect and what the market actually offers. It's not that there are no men. The problem is that the number of men with good education, excellent salaries, good looks, and who are also willing to participate in these meetings is very small. And this is just the beginning of the silent collapse of modern love in China's major cities. The culture of the leftover woman. Another important factor in understanding why so many women are single in China, especially in big cities like Shanghai, is the weight of a very strong label. Translated literally, it means leftover woman. In simpler terms, as in quiet. The term began to be used strongly from the 2000s to refer to single women over 27 or 30 years old. And the curious thing is that it doesn't matter if they have a solid career, good health, emotional maturity, or economic independence. Society judges them with a single criterion: are they married or not? And if the answer is no, the pressure comes from all sides: family, coworkers, neighbors, the media. It is very common to hear phrases like, "Are you getting old?" "If you keep waiting, you'll end up alone," or "Are you being too picky?" A brutal cultural pressure. Cultural pressure is very strong. Marriage remains extremely important in Chinese culture. But here lies the great dilemma. While society pushes women towards early marriage, the modern country, especially in big cities, offers them a completely different path: freedom, education, career, financial autonomy. So, for many young Chinese women, the decision isn't difficult. They chose to follow the path of success. They invested in themselves, studied, traveled, built a very good life, many earning more than 200,000 yuan a year. They don't need a husband to survive. But all that freedom did not eliminate the prejudice. The independent woman started to be seen by many men as difficult, demanding, or even arrogant. The price of independence. With every passing year, with each birthday that comes, the image of a spinster strengthens. She is seen as someone who was left behind, even if she is ahead in almost every aspect of life. Still, she continues to be labeled as Shengnu. The press itself feeds this stigma, with repeated narratives in TV series, dating shows, and even commercials. They all repeat the same idea: a valuable woman is one who marries young, preferably to a successful man. Those who don't fit that mold are portrayed as lonely, frustrated, or even guilty for being alone. It's a very cruel trap. If a woman decides to live for herself, she is judged. If she lowers her standards to please the family, she lives unhappily. And the cruelest of all, for Chinese men, that expiration date almost doesn't exist. A single man of 35 or 40 is seen as mature, in the prime of his life, but a woman of the same age is already considered a leftover. That label of SHNGN is not just a word. It's an invisible pressure that affects decisions, self-esteem, and even the real possibilities of finding a partner. Many women end up internalizing this thought and start blaming themselves, even though they have done everything right. And that is why, even in a country with over 30 million single men, so many women in big cities remain alone. Not for lack of options, but because of a system that insists on devaluing them, even when they have succeeded in life. A pressure that comes from above. There is an even deeper reason behind the cultural pressure for so many Chinese women to marry young and have children. And it doesn't just come from families, neighbors, or the media. It comes from above. The Chinese state needs and wants these women to marry. And to understand why, we have to go back a few decades to the time when the one-child policy existed. The legacy of the one-child policy. For more than 30 years, the Chinese government forbade most families from having more than one child. The goal was to control population growth and avoid a demographic crisis. And in that sense, it worked. The birth rate dropped dramatically, but the side effect was one of the greatest social imbalances on the planet, an aging country with few young people and many single men. This is because, in a culture that has always valued the birth of males more, many families found ways to avoid having daughters. Some hid the birth of girls, others simply did not register them with the government. The result was a generation with far more men than women. Today, it is estimated that there are over 30 million more men than women in China. The change came late. Over time, the government recognized its mistake. It abandoned the one-child policy in 2015, then authorized 2 children, and today allows up to 3. But it was already too late. Women who grew up during that period, especially in large cities, were encouraged to study, compete, and work hard. They reached adulthood more educated, independent, and ambitious than any previous generation. And now, many of them simply do not want to marry or have children, at least not under government pressure. A crisis for the state. For the Chinese state, this is a huge problem, economically, socially, and politically. Fewer births mean less workforce, less tax revenue, more retirees to support, fewer soldiers, fewer engineers, doctors, teachers, scientists. And to make matters worse, the Chinese population continues to age rapidly. The country is full of older people. That's why the government is doing everything possible to reverse this situation. They need to change it, or modern China could collapse. But the government cannot simply force women to marry. The official narrative, a powerful narrative repeated in commercials, soap operas, news reports, and even in official documents. This narrative says that a valuable woman is one who marries young, has children, takes care of the home, and contributes to her country. Being a mother is her mission, and waiting too long is seen as an act of selfishness. According to this logic, professional success without a family is something empty. The term Xingnu, that leftover woman, is part of this narrative. It was popularized by various state media with the explicit aim of making women wake up and stop rejecting suitors. Financial incentives. At the same time, the government is also implementing incentive policies. And here, we are literally talking about money. In several regions of the country, local authorities are offering financial rewards to couples who officially get married. In Luliang, a city in northern China, the government gives about 1,500 yuan as a reward for registering a marriage. It may seem little by the standards of cities like St. Gallen or Beijing, but in smaller or rural regions, that amount is equivalent to half of an average monthly salary. For many, it is more than they would earn in several weeks of work. But this type of incentive only highlights another issue. a new generation that does not want to get married. Young people are no longer enthusiastic about the idea of getting married. In 2023, the total number of marriages fell by 20% compared to the previous year, according to official data. And it was not an isolated case. The trend has been declining for years. Marriage, which was once seen as essential for adult life in China, is losing its appeal. Young people face extremely high living costs, a saturated job market, exorbitant prices for raising children, and often don't even have the time or energy to start a family. Moreover, there are other policies aimed at attracting women with bonuses that increase according to the number of children they have. When not even money is enough in some cities, the government goes so far as to offer double or triple the incentives, depending on the number of children a couple has. In addition to this, there are also benefits like health insurance, support for enrollment in public kindergartens, and even school discounts in certain provinces. But none of this seems to be enough because these women have already seen another side of the story. They have experienced what it is like to have freedom, ambition, and life goals. And for many of them, going back would be like giving up everything they have achieved. The state now faces a dilemma. It needs these women as mothers, but it educated them to be leaders, to be successful. And the result is this impasse: millions of women who are very independent, with well-established lives, but at the same time do not want to be mothers or start a family. And now, the government is trying to bring them back to a traditional role. For a long time, it was said that there was a shortage of women in China. But in the big cities, the scenario has changed. Nowadays, dating events are full of women and almost empty of men. Why? Because many Chinese men, especially those from the big cities, no longer want to get married. Not because they don't believe in love or family, but because for them, marriage has become a kind of humiliating job interview where they are evaluated as if they were a product, a marriage that has become a transaction. In many organized meetings, the questions are repeated. Do you have a house? Do you have a car? How much do you earn per year? Are you an only child? Will your parents leave you any inheritance? And if the answers are not as expected, the meeting ends right there. All of this has turned into a kind of economic transaction, and the men know it. They say they are treated like bill-paying machines, while their emotional needs are completely ignored. Even those who have everything are rejected. And the worst part is that even men who meet all the requirements, a house, an expensive car, a high salary, sometimes are also rejected. If they don't have the charisma, beauty, height, or expected status, it doesn't matter. Humiliation doesn't just affect those who have little, it affects all levels of society. And what do these men do? They simply withdraw. They stop trying. They don't go on dates, avoid courtship, lie down and give up. Some adopt a lifestyle called tamping, which literally means lying down and surrendering. They choose to live with less, spend less, demand less. And with that, they don't get married. Others focus entirely on work and adopt a lifestyle called Nijin, which translates to a life where one works non-stop, saves a lot of money, but gives up everything else. They don't get married because they feel the game is rigged. And because of that, it's not worth playing. It's not just one side's fault. The marriage crisis in China is not just about female demands or cultural changes. It also reflects a generation of men exhausted, hurt, who no longer see marriage as something good for their lives. The relationship crisis in China is not a simple matter, much less the fault of one side. On one hand, there are thousands of women in big cities with good lives, good incomes, but living alone and bearing the stigma of being left over. The government, worried about the population decline, tries to bring them back to marriage. Sometimes with flowers, sometimes with money, but always with the maximum pressure possible. On the other hand, there are men fleeing marriage, not for lack of interest, but out of exhaustion, because they feel reduced to a resume, a bank account, a few square meters. And in the midst of all this is the state, desperate, trying to correct past policy failures. When love becomes a product, in the end, What we see is a country with millions of singles, but fewer and fewer real dates. A market where love has become a product, and marriage an investment. And when the state needs to pay for love to happen, honestly, I no longer know what the solution is. Well, that was today's video. Leave me your opinion in the comments. Do you think China has a solution to this problem?